All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Peter Forsgaard, and I am a professional photographer from Helsinki, Finland. And today we're having live, and I will have a special guest, Rob Trek, and I will introduce him in a second. But I hope you're all good, and good morning if you're from US or South America, and good afternoon, all you from Europe, and good evening if you're from Asia or Australia. This is a perfect time because most of the world is awake right now. So this is a perfect time for you to watch our live stream with Rob Trek. Is my sound okay? And always appreciate if you tell where you're from. And don't mind if I sometimes look to the side because I have a monitor there where I can see your comments. And let's see if we can bring Rob in. Let's unmute him first and let's see if we can get him in. Hey, welcome, Rob. How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you, Peter?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Good to see you.
It is very, very good to see you. It's a long time. We've had a few live streams together, a couple in your channel and at least one on my channel. So
yes,
it's always interesting to hear.
I appreciate it. It's a real privilege and honor for me as well to be on your channel because you do so much for the Olympus community, and and I watch your channel and I learn a lot of things, and a lot of times I'll tell my viewers, hey, check out this video from Peter, this was really excellent. It's really a privilege for me to be here, and hopefully a lot of my viewers that maybe new are here as well that haven't found your channel yet for one reason or another. So I look forward to seeing some of you here as well. But awesome.
Oh yeah, it is. And same goes to you guys that if you have missed Rob's channel, go and subscribe to his channel and watch his videos after this live stream. There is a link in the description to Rob's channels. And lately he's been doing a lot of live streams. And before we talk more, I will just show you what the program will be. It will be very simple. I will talk and chat with Rob for a while, and then we'll have a Q&A. And let's start with a few questions. So how have you been? Have you been in lockdown, or can you walk around? And because how is it over there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many places. I can go out and walk around to the parks, and there's a lot of places. I really shouldn't have any challenges doing photo walks and things like I used to. Because I've been out, I go out to walk the dog pretty regular, and I always bring my camera with me. But there's always, I'm still a little bit anxious about being out. Maybe it's all in my head, but I get a little bit anxious, and that's why I haven't been vlogging as much lately. And there's always been a little bit of unrest, especially in the area that I live in, the nation's capital here. Again, it's probably just in my head, but that's, for anyone that knows me, I vlogged a lot last year, and this year it's been tempered quite a bit. But I think I'll be able to start getting back out there again and, vlogging like I used to, and talking about photography and things like that. So that's what's been kind of going on over here for me. The ironic thing is, though, my professional work, paid work, actually has been picking up a little bit. So
that's good. That's good.
I do real estate, so a lot of the properties I go to are empty anyway, so I'm not dealing with people and things like that. And being in the very high dense area, population-wise, it's very different than other parts of the country where things have slowed down quite a bit. Over here, still traffic jams. I got stuck in one yesterday. It's just crazy. So, but yeah, I'm excited to get back out and start vlogging, and the weather's cooled off quite a bit, which is nice. So lots to look forward to anyway. I'm excited. So
yeah, actually, I'm looking forward to your vlogging because I remember those videos where you kind of I think it was called photo walks, where you kind of talked out how you think about the image, because I think that is something that I'm really interested in to see how other photographers see and kind of go forward in what are they doing, what they want, what they see, and how they approach the whole thing. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I got a lot of good feedback when I talked about how I see a scene or compose the photo, because I think what's really interesting about vlogging and doing that kind of style where I talk about what I'm thinking is, I'm panning around and showing people the same thing that I see, but then I find something interesting in that particular part of the scene and I focus on that. And I get feedback like, wow, I would have never seen that, or I would have never thought about something like that, or how do you take something so mundane or ordinary and just make a really good picture, And I'm like, well, I try, it's just a matter of just going out there all the time. And like you said, I talk about, I like to look at triangles and geometry because, I'm an architectural photographer, and it's surprising how much of that you find in nature as well, the geometry. And that's kind of my go-to composition style, is looking for the geometry in nature and order, versus a lot of people like they go for chaos, right?
Yeah,
which works too, because I see lots of pictures that are cluttered and they're beautiful, so that's an area that I need to grow in, and it helps me by seeing other people's photography. When I go out, it helps me to grow as well as a photographer. But the one thing that a lot of people know me for is I got to get my lines straight, right? I don't like crooked horizons. I don't like, off-center buildings and things like that. But, occasionally a Dutch angle is okay. But
yeah, I don't think it's nothing wrong with, having the horizon or the buildings a bit off and not straight. But if it's just slightly, then I don't like that. But, go wild, then it's all right. That's what I like. And I just thought of one thing. I don't know if you saw that me and Matti Sulanto, we made this challenge video about, we went to the same place. And
right.
We had
yeah, I haven't seen that one yet. I do have a bookmark to go.
Because what I was thinking that that would be awesome to do between us. I don't know how we could do a video like that, but maybe we could.
Yeah.
Make it kind of like an assignment, and then both, film like a vlog style, and then we kind of, we could do 2 for each of our channels.
Absolutely, because
that would be totally great, because right now we cannot just meet, but maybe in the future I'll come over and we'll have a photo walk together.
Oh wow! You think you can make it over here?
Sometimes, no, not right now, but because I've been to the US many times and got a lot of friends there. So
that would be awesome. I got 2 extra bedrooms empty. Well, they got a bed in.
All right.
You don't have to worry about hotel or food or anything. You'll be all set when you get here.
Well, maybe we could figure out something after all this crazy times are over. But you have been doing quite a lot of live streams with where you have been talking about photography in a way that you edit other people's photographs.
Yes.
I have found those really interesting. The times that you are live are a bit odd for me because, it's usually if it's Sunday afternoon, I'm cooking dinner. So sometimes I've been just listening to it and not watching it, but that's really interesting. And that's probably actually teaching you also about photography when you see a lot of other people's images and kind of like need to think about it really.
Absolutely. It's helped me a lot. I've probably vetted about 1,000 pictures by now, just from other viewers.
Yeah.
And I see certain styles that I'm not good at all. Like sometimes I see images that are very low contrast, very soft, but still sharp. And I'm not good at that. I'm so used to, cranking up the contrast and making things very punchy, saturated. I just kind of like that kind of gritty feel. But then when I see a low contrast image that's just beautiful, and I'm like, wow, that's a great image. Why can't I do that? So it helps me grow also, like I was saying earlier. And I like to think that people are learning as well by seeing other people's images.
Oh yes.
And they a lot of people know me now because I have a lot of regular people that come back and watch the editing, and a lot of times I'll put my picture out there. Well, actually, all the time now, I put an image out there of one of mine that viewers edit, and we go over them at the end of the stream. And I'm always impressed
really
with what the viewers do with them, and I start to see their styles, right? Like some viewers I see, they have a really good eye for color, and then other viewers, they have really great eye for composition and the subject matter and being able to crop in. And then some are just super creative and take something in a whole different direction. And the images I put out there are usually images that I struggled with personally, that I took that picture and I said, this is a neat picture, but I cannot get anything. I couldn't figure out how to edit it, And then when I get back, I'm always impressed. So it's a lot of fun for me, and hopefully my viewers enjoy it. And it's, I've cranked up the live streaming quite a bit to like 3 days a week now. If we include today, it's 4 days. But
how do people submit the images? Is there some place where you
can use a form on Google? So I have a Google Drive. And you can create a form on Google Drive, and then you put a link to that form, and that form has a space to put like your name and a place to submit your picture. And then that all goes onto my Google Drive, and then I just download them into a folder on my computer and then edit them. So it's very simple. Yeah.
I used to do one of my first couple of live streams where that I had a video about a subject. Let's say that I had a video about, I think it was about multiple exposure, and then next week I had a live stream where people be sending me those photographs, and that was like 2 years ago, but I got like 30 to 40 photographs and went over. I didn't really edit them. I just showed them and talked about the image, and I think that was
that would be
something that I want to do in the future.
You should pick that up again. Start doing that again, and maybe I'm going to steal that idea too.
Yeah, you can, of course.
People have been asking me,
it's like how does it go that a good artist copy and the great ones steal? I think it was Pablo Picasso who said that.
Wow.
Yeah. So about when you were saying about the looking other people's photographs, there was a video by Sean Tucker, which I haven't watched yet. But the title was something about that, when to copy and when to stop, and it was about that copying images that other people have been photographing is a great way to learn, because one of the assignments in every photo school, at least here in Finland, is to copy some photograph that is world famous. Try to reproduce that photograph and learn how it's done. That mainly goes for studio and that kind of stuff, because it's a bit hard to copy a let's say like Cartier-Bresson street photography. It's a lot harder because the streets are not the same.
Right.
But that's something that everyone should do. But there is a time when you need to stop and start, doing your own stuff. But stealing ideas is, I think it's marvelous. That's because everything has been photographed already. You cannot do really unique stuff. It has to be something unique. The subject matter, something needs to happen that hasn't happened before.
I think photography really is about, at least for me, it's just about personal gratification and learning and growing. As a person, because when I go out and I take pictures, I try to think about, even if it's like in the forest or at the park, I try to think about, like, when I see a tree, I say to myself, what is the kind of life that this tree has? It's kind of silly, right? But you just start to get deep, and then I try to capture the essence of that tree, right? Or when I go out on street photography, I focus mostly on the architecture and composition and things. But when I'm out photographing, I look around at the people and I think about, their lives and how my life is maybe different from theirs. It's just a very personal time for me, and that's why I enjoy photography so much, because everyone can make it their own. They don't have to be the next, great photographer, Ansel Adams or anything. They just need to be, enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, and that's what's great about photography. You can enjoy it in so many different ways. And I always tell people it's the better your skill set in photography, the less the gear matters, the less important the gear is. And
exactly.
That's why I used to love those old videos when, pro photographer, cheap camera that they used to do. Those are always a lot of fun to watch, because they go out and they take these amazing images without, with the worst camera ever, right? Like pocket cameras, Barbie cameras, things like that.
Oh yeah. And that sometimes comes, because I've been teaching photography for over 20 years. In most of the students are people who are not photographers, but they kind of like have to photograph where they work. They might have some, well, they used to have some kind of, company magazines, and they need to take picture for that. And now they have social media. And sometimes, in a group, like, let's say that there are 10, there's always one person who doesn't know anything about photography, is totally asking stupid questions all the time. And then they have to do this assignment. And usually that's the person who comes with the best images.
Yeah.
And then the other part, there's always someone who knows everything. And unfortunately, usually a man, a middle-aged man who has all the gear, and usually comes up back with the worst images. That's just... that's almost every time like that.
Yeah, I can see that. And like I said, it's some people are into the gear a lot, and that's how they get pleasure out of the hobby or the process. They enjoy the gear, the process of what the gear can do, right? Not so much what they can do with the gear, but what the gear can do when they go out. And I get just as much pleasure out of that as well. Like, when I take the M1 Mark III out, I'm like, oh man, I love this handheld high-res shot,
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't mean I'm going to take a better picture, but I enjoy that, that I can take a picture in a high-res shot handheld, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. But, also, I also try to take a good picture while I'm there as well. So it's, people approach it from different angles, but I know where you're coming from. Is like, my nephew was like, I think he was like 9 or 10 years old, and we went out on a photo walk, and he never went out. He just got the camera as a gift on his birthday or something, and he took the best pictures, right? I was like, oh my God, he had such an eye for it. He never followed up with that as much, but he had a really good eye for it. And I always think about that when when I go out, I struggle with photography a lot, and so like I said, but it doesn't matter. I go out to enjoy. Like I said, photography, I think, is a very personal thing for each person.
It is. Like you said, that it can be practiced in so many ways. You can, and nothing wrong with if you love gear. I have a lot of gear. I might even have more cameras than Rob. I'm not sure. And I know you have a lot of cameras.
Yeah.
But anyways, I love gear, but still, I always try to remember that it's not the gear. It's like what, as you said, Rob, that what you can do with the gear does matter. It's not the gear itself. But of course, sometimes if you want to, go to a height and photograph birds, most likely you cannot do very well if you have a really wide angle lens. So sometimes you need certain gears or certain gear. But there is one Swedish photographer who uses some other camera brand that his specialty was wide angle bird photography. And what he did, he had these remote cameras that he put in, and all these birds were starting, getting curious about the camera. He got amazing shot with the really wide angle shot where you have a big head of a bird right close to the lens. So you can do it, but of course it's a bit different thing.
Right. But, wow, that's really cool.
It's I think it's really, and what I like about that is that you kind of like let's say that usually if you want to make portraits, everybody wants the 45mm lens, either the M.Zuiko or the Pro version.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do portraits with a really wide angle if that's what you kind of like want. Of course, you don't want to do close-ups, but you can do a lot more with that, telling a story or a story. So it depends on your style, and always try to make the best out of what you already have before buying something. Of course, there might be time you need a bit of better lens, you need a bit of better camera, of course.
Yeah.
But that should not be the first thing when you want to be better. Start thinking, what lens do I need? Right. I think that's a wrong approach. It comes later, I think.
Yeah, and that's what this came up yesterday actually in a stream when I was talking about. I took out my 75-300 lens, and I showed a few pictures how terrible they were. But I said the reason I'm going out more with it now is because I'm interested in getting the 100-400 that came out. And if I can't do well with a 75-300, I'll be wasting money when I buy a 100-400.
Oh yeah.
There's
actually one question.
Oh, okay.
From Lucas 2535. Any tips for photographing in foggy conditions? When does fog add to an image? When does it make image boring? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Wow. Yeah, I don't like to go out when it's cloudy, so fog is fog is definitely not my forte. All I can say is it would probably help if you used a polarizer with the fog. That'll help cut through some of the fog so you can still see a subject behind the fog. And fog gives you that low contrast, very soft image. So look for subjects that would suit in fog, like maybe a, what do you call it? A meadow, a nice open meadow with a few trees, or a lake. I did one with a barn and some geese flying over with a nice fog, that was rolling along the ground. So with fog, that's, I would say a polarizer would help though, to kind of cut through some of that softness, right? Because I like a little bit crispier images.
Yeah, well, fog is, I like photographs, taken in fog, especially if you have the sun behind the fog, then you can get really nice sun rays and just shoot against the sun, because it will make really interesting images. And then if you want a bit crispier looking image in fog, you can use dehaze in edit.
Yes.
That takes quite a bit of the fog away. It's actually an amazing tool. So that's one way of making those images look the way you want. But I think foggy images are really nice. You can use that negative space where you have a lot of empty space, and then you might have a bird in the sky and some silhouette of a bridge or a city behind, something like that. I think those might be really, really great looking images. So, because I always say that you get really great images during bad weather. Unfortunately, I don't like bad weather to go out, so
yeah, me neither.
I should.
If it's cloudy out, I'm like, nah, I think I'll stay home.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, let's say if it's really gray, overcast weather, then you don't have any shadows, you don't have any light, then images are really dull. And I don't know if you meant that, then it's actually really hard to get any images. But then maybe just have some not that much things in the image, just a few things to make it like a more abstract in a way.
When I have soft light, I'll bring a flash and do close-up photography.
Yeah,
the flash always brings that contrast and lighting, and that's just me. Like I said, but I would love to be able to expand to more images like that, like fog or low contrast, cloudy day
and then there's
photography.
One person from Ulf Lund who says the wide-angle photographer from Sweden must be Brutus Östling. Yes, exactly. I did not remember his name, but yes, that's who I meant.
Awesome. I got to check that out.
Yeah, it is.
Let's see if there are any. And expand
then
right?
Yeah, then I have to ask a few questions, because you have been on the dark side on your videos, because you've been shooting with Nikon before and now Olympus. But I saw some Canon RP on your video, and it's not yours, if I remember correctly, when you were kind of like comparing it. And there was some interesting thoughts about the IBIS, and I was watching the video, and I don't know if there's somebody who hasn't seen it. Can you tell us a bit more about the difference, if you can remember? You probably don't have the camera anymore, but
I think
the IBIS or the stabilizer with the lens and all that.
Okay. The sensor itself is fixed. It didn't have any stabilization, so all the stabilization was in the lens, and it did have digital image stabilization, where it cropped in a little bit to stabilize the image, and I think really that's really only affects the video side of things, where it just crops in a little bit too much. So even though you're buying a full frame camera, you're trying to get that full frame kind of look, after it's cropped in and you add in the digital image stabilization, it's like you might as well be shooting with a Micro Four Thirds.
Oh, really?
For video, especially in 4K, it just cropped in so much. So
that's what I heard, and I saw in your video how much it crops actually.
Yeah, I didn't really get into the cropping. I just told people that if you're going to shoot in 4K, forget it. Don't bother. 4K is dead to me on that camera. And I know the higher end models will do better, with full frame 4K and all of that. But that particular camera,
unless they don't overheat.
Yeah, then they start overheating, right? And you have to wait 30 minutes for it to cool off. Oh my God!
I don't know anything about it. I've never tested it, but this was a bad joke, because it's only what I've read, the big feud about that some say it doesn't, some say it does. So, but that was a bad joke. Sorry.
That's okay. I mean, you're right though. Overheating can be an issue with a lot of cameras, and it has been for a long time. And they're gradually getting over that. Panasonic overcame it by putting a fan in the camera, right?
Why not?
Why not? But I think as an entry-level full-frame camera, if you want a full-frame camera, it was okay. It was okay. It's well-made, had some very good. I think they did give some thought to the design and the ergonomics, and the body itself, very small, very comparable to our EM1s. However, when you start putting those bazooka lenses on it, they were huge. And it just reminded me of why I liked Olympus so much, or Micro Four Thirds, is it lets you pack several lenses at various focal lengths without taking up tons of space, and being awkward, because I took it out on a couple of photo walks, the Canon, and halfway through, I think if David Crooks is here, he'll tell you, it's like I didn't want to carry it with me. It was just so bulky.
But you did a good job with that, having two cameras on your hand, and you were always, this is so heavy. I was laughing when we were walking and testing the IBIS, and I can't hold it. You're always switching hands all the time. But okay, you had two cameras there, and that was I think it was fun.
And you can see the IBIS, is not even close to what we can do with our Micro Four Thirds. So for video work, clearly I think Olympus still is the strongest camera in the field in terms of image stabilization. And for 90% of the people, 99% I would say, even the video features, that are in the camera are more than enough. It's these very, it bothers me when I see, of course there's always people in the gear, but the Panasonics, have all these additional video features for videographers that are really hardcore.
Yeah.
And not most people, they barely can, just trying to grasp the concept of a histogram. Never mind, getting into scopes and all the other things that video offers. It's its own little beast. But yeah, I think. For when I was comparing the video between the Canon and the Olympus, the feedback mostly was that people liked the images coming from the Olympus. It was more natural. And I'd have to agree, the colors were more accurate and more natural on the Olympus for video work.
Actually, yeah, the Olympus JPEG out of the camera is pretty nice. It's a bit oversaturated for my taste, but you turn off the keep warm colors on, you turn that off, but then I think it's pretty good like that.
Yeah, and that was another thing, was the white balance I felt was more accurate on the Olympus over the Canon. So it's, you know, it's that color science thing, right, that people talk about.
Most likely it's a bit different color science. But then there was something that actually was a bit better. It was the AF, or the face priority, or what do you call it?
Yes. Let me elaborate on that.
Okay.
Yeah, against the EM5 Mark III and the EM1 Mark II, you could only go about maybe 3 meters with I forget what focal length I was using, because basically once your face kind of gets too small in the frame, it loses you. Yep. And the Canon, I was able to go out 10, 15 meters out, and it still found my face. Now that said, I also compared it. I didn't do that in the video, but I also compared it against the EM1 Mark III. Okay. And the EM1 Mark III did just as well, if not better, than the Canon for that.
Oh, I see, yeah.
So when people say that the face detect, or Olympus claimed that the face detect improved in the EM1 Mark III, I can definitively say it's certainly, you know, that it did. And it's equal to the Canon in that respect in terms of face detect and autofocus. Okay. It detected my face all the way out to the same distance. I think out of like about 30 pictures, it only missed me twice. And the Canon was the same. 2 or 3 times at most, it missed focus on my face.
Yeah, I saw the images on the test, and it wasn't actually the easiest place for a camera to find, because there were all these trees and everything in the behind there.
Oh yeah, I made sure it was very contrasty. So yeah, kudos to Canon. You know, the claims of it being the autofocus is good. Yeah, no question. But Olympus doesn't get enough credit on the EM1 Mark III for its face detect. It was spot on all the way out.
Yeah, it works really well. The only time it doesn't work if you have a really thick variable ND filter, because sometimes when I'm doing my YouTube videos and I have the, you know, been talking, you know, now everything went okay, then I see, oh, it's not sharp.
Yeah, well, you killed all the light coming into the camera, right?
Yeah, there's probably has something to do with the light. It doesn't, you know, have enough light for me.
Yeah,
but definitely. That's the rare case when you have really thick, really sunny weather and you need to use the ND filter, really thick ND filter. Then it might struggle a bit.
Yeah, and of course a little bit, maybe a little less contrast as well. You would think it'd be opposite when you put an ND filter in, but I think it's mostly about the ND filters killing, you know, 3-4 stops of light.
Yeah.
And so I don't like to use ND filters for video, you know, because I know everybody likes to do that 180 rule, where you double your shutter speed versus your frame rate. And every time I try to do that, it's a compromise, right? I'm compromising something. So yeah, I don't do it very often. And the few times I did try to do it, I was compromising something. I can't remember what, but I said, you know, the 180 rule is not that big a deal. If you're just vlogging and just watching, right?
Let's say that you shoot, let's say 30p, then you should have 1/60th of a second. It doesn't matter if it's 40 or 80. Nobody can tell the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Or 120 or 125. Nobody can tell the difference anyway. Yeah. So
the only time I've noticed where I have to be very conscious of the shutter speed versus the frame rate is when I have to speed up or slow down the video, particularly when I'm going into slow motion.
Yeah, that's
true. Video can get choppy depending on, you know, that combination of frame rate and shutter speed. And it's a learning process. You know, it's something I just recently discovered where...
Yeah, it is. But the funny thing is that it's actually from way back when they actually invented the moving picture, because that's when the cameras had only one shutter speed, and they just decided it's going to be 100 of a degree shutter,
Yeah.
and that's what we used to. That's the main reason we still like that.
Yeah, and
But
I watched
maybe it has changed a bit, that we like maybe a little bit smoother, because the screens are getting bigger and bigger. Maybe the smoother.
oh yeah, the screens,
movement
and I think it's all these gamers.
Yeah, could be. And then I have to highlight one thing here. Wait a minute. This one is great. Robin Wong says that Peter Forsgard drop check. My mom says hi.
Hi.
Hi back. That was great. That's great.
Yeah, I think Robin said he was on holiday or vacation.
People are watching this from Facebook, but it's interesting because I'm using a new software. It's called Streamyard, what I'm using right now, and I can stream also to Facebook and YouTube at the same time, which is kind of interesting. So this one is also on my Facebook group.
Wow.
Live. And there are most of commenting are from YouTube, but I can see if the commenting is coming from Facebook, and this is really interesting. I was planning on doing also live stream to Twitter, but the commenting on Twitter might be a bit rough, so I didn't do that, because I need to have somebody monitoring the comments or the tweets.
Yeah,
that comes, and it's actually from Periscope, but it will show on. All right, and Richard Cassidy is saying, yeah, Rob has spare rooms. We're all going to Rob's house.
yeah, but you know, when you get here, I'm going to do like the Karate Kid. I'm going to give you a paintbrush. You're going to have to paint the room that you're in. And then someone else can clean the windows. And
all right, that's cool. And then you can imagine you can get all your chores done. We can, do some. There's always something.
Yeah, I was thinking about opening up the house as like a haunted house, because the paint is peeling in my house, and it needs a lot of work, but it would make a great photo project, I think.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Maybe I'll come and document that while you work, and I'll take the photos.
While I work.
Or maybe the other way around.
No, we'll get some viewers to come in and do the painting. We'll call it a workshop, a photo workshop, and then they all come in.
Yeah, people are working and you're photographing.
Right. See, I'm the photo guy. You're the worker.
Yeah. And now let's start with some Q&A next, and
awesome.
And see if we have any questions. And can you see, Rob, the questions? If there are any comments you want to answer, just go ahead.
Okay, I just see the last one here about the 180 rule, because of Peter Robinson's asking, is the 180 rule because of rolling shutter? OMD doesn't have that. Well, the 180 rule, you just do it manually, right? You just dial in the shutter speed and the frame rate for the video. I think some cameras do have the option to automatically do it for you, but on the OMDs, you just do it manually. So if you're at 24p, you just dial in a 48 shutter speed, 48th of a second shutter speed. Now, rolling shutter is a whole totally different aspect of video. Rolling shutter is actually how the sensor picks up the image while you're recording video. So it scans down line by line. And as you pan the camera, it may not have finished scanning that particular scene. So it's picking up the scene as you're panning, and that's what kind of causes the rolling shutter effect. So the 180 rule has nothing to do with rolling shutter, so to speak. And there's no way to avoid it, regardless of what shutter speed you put in or frame rate you put in. If you pan the camera during video, you're going to get a rolling shutter effect. Now, Olympus, particularly the M1s, have one of the best, if not the best, resistance to rolling shutter. And I did test for that a little bit in my Canon versus Olympus, and Sony has one of the worst. Canon's kind of in between, but Olympus has probably the best, even over Panasonic in terms of rolling shutter. So yeah, the two things are not related when you're setting shutter speed and frame rate. with rolling shutter. It's a whole different thing. And there's lots of videos about rolling shutter that you can kind of YouTube and see exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about it scanning down the sensor, and you'll get a little better understanding. And I have a video about shutter speed that talks about that as well, if you want to watch a really long version about it. But if you want a quick and dirty.
Yeah, but I think that was a really good explanation. And usually, if you use the mechanical shutter, then it's not a big of a problem. But if you use the electronic shutter, the silent shutter, then you will.
Yeah, and then video is electronic shutter, right? So, because the shutter stays open.
There is couple of comments that I have to comment, that he said that paint the rooms 18% gray, and that's, of course, the 18% gray is the way that the camera metering sees the world, and it tries to make everything mid-gray, and that's why if you're photographing snow, you need to overexpose almost 2 stops because it's pure white. But then there's been some clever press photographer who used Bill Clinton's hair as a gray point. I think that's a good one. I wonder how he measured that. Did he go, right next to him and measured it with the with the spot meter or whatever? If he had one of those handheld meters, he went right there next to it. I don't know how this works, but that's
18% gray is an interesting concept, right? Because I can paint my wall 18% gray, for example, but if I turn the lights off, is it still 18% gray?
It is.
Right? But then what's your exposure changes with the light, right?
That's true. That's true.
Having an 18% gray should be tied to a certain I guess luminance level or lux, right? How many lux is really 18% gray?
That's true.
And so I always go back to just the Sunny 16 rule, and
that works.
That works. Go from there. So 18% gray at the Sunny 16 rule has a certain amount of luminance that affects the camera's meter depending on how you're measuring. But that was always a very confusing concept for me to understand, because people say, yeah, just shoot at 18% gray. And I'm like, well, what if it's dark or what if it's light? Doesn't mean the exposure it's going to be different, right? Even though it's all 18% gray.
That's true. And people who do not know what Sunny 16 rule is, that it is that on a sunny day, you set the shutter speed the same as your ISO and f16, and you will get perfect exposures. Did I say it correctly? Yeah, I guess I did.
Say it one more time.
So if you have a sunny weather, you set your aperture f16 and then set the shutter speed the same as your ISO. Then it should be okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always do ISO 100, shutter speed 1/100th, f16.
Yeah, but if you put, but that was because back in the days when you used film, if you had a 400 ISO film, then you have 1/400th of a second.
But it makes perfect sense if you match ISO and shutter speed, because it's linear on both sides.
Yeah, it does. It works. And that's what I used when I was testing my old Pen F, the film version, which didn't have any light meter. Then I used Sunny 16 rule, and it worked perfectly. The only problem was that the shutter wasn't really consistent, but that was nothing to do with the exposure itself. It was the shutter that wasn't.
Right.
But okay, the camera from 1959, so we can. Let's see.
I looked for instructions from old film, because a lot of times when you bought film, it used to come with instructions about how to set your shutter speed based on the lighting conditions.
Yes.
Which was always kind of neat. So I Googled that online to find some old instructions that had the Sunny 16 rule, but also had it for cloudy, for shade, everything like that. But anyhow, any other questions? Let's move on.
Yeah, there was actually one about the 18% gray. 18 is 18. You can, of course, underexpose if you want to convey a darker room. That's true. So it's actually when you use the 18 or the gray card, it should give you the perfect exposure. If you want it darker, then you just underexpose a bit, and then if you overexpose.
Right. That's. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that.
We'll have to figure that out. I'll need to brush up my. Yeah, that's true. What Rahul Dar says, Peter. Those are ASA times. Exactly. Yeah, you call them ASA or ASA.
Right.
And then there was one question, and did I miss it? No, I did not. And let's see if do you guys have any more questions about Olympus or photography? Doesn't really matter. But how much have you been using the M1 Mark III?
Oh, I've been using it actually a lot professionally now. It sort of replaced my EM10 Mark II. I used the EM10 Mark II for a long time, but now I use the EM1.
And that, when you're talking about the real estate.
Yeah, for the real estate and for some video. I'm now using it for video and real estate.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's totally replaced the EM10 Mark II. For photo walks and things, my EM5 Mark III is still my go-to for the smaller, more compact size and weight. And the excellent autofocus for vlogging and things like that. But yeah, I use the EM1 Mark III almost exclusively now for business. And what do you use for lenses when you do the real estate photography and video? Oh, mostly for the photography side, I use the 8mm fisheye lens. It sounds funny, right? But it gives me a really wide angle, and it's very sharp. 20 megapixels is plenty. So I can correct it in post, the fisheye effect, and get a nice rectilinear image very easily.
Do you use the in-camera correction or in post?
No, I do it in post. Because the in-camera correction is JPEG only.
That's true. That's true, yeah.
Yeah, so I shoot everything in RAW on the jobs because I do bracketing and blending, multiple exposures for real estate, right? Because I have to bring the light in from a window, then I have to bring the light in from like the shaded areas, and a lot of times I have to blend out different white balance problems.
Oh yeah,
those are different. Tungsten, fluorescent, it's a freaking nightmare. It's very easy to fix in photography. Now for video work, I've been using the 7-14 Panasonic, and because you can't correct, it's a little more difficult to correct fisheye in video. It can be done, but oh my God, it slows the computer down so much when you start adding layers of correction to video. So as a workflow process, I stick to rectilinear lenses for video. But yeah, the 7-14 rectilinear lens for video and the 8mm fisheye for the photography side.
Oh yeah. Have you tried correcting the fisheye, the 8mm in video using some GoPro presets or something like that? Does it work? I haven't tested it, so I don't know.
It works. It works fine. I use DaVinci Resolve. I think you use Final Cut, but
no, I use Premiere actually. Yeah.
Oh, you use Premiere. Okay, yeah. So in DaVinci Resolve, you just do it in the I can't remember now because I don't do it anymore. But I was able to correct the fisheye effect in video, and it's not hard. It just adds another layer of processing to the video, and as you know, it's like video can really bog down your machine to no end. Like when I'm shooting, sorry, there's a helicopter flying over.
I can't hear it.
When I'm shooting video or processing video, like if I do a 4K video on my computer, and then I start adding layers of color correction or smoothing out the frame rates or cropping, and any kind of processing I do, it's like the processing drops down to like 2 or 3 frames per second, and it can take like 30 minutes to process like 1 minute of video sometimes.
Oh really?
It's like, oh my God,
that takes some time.
And
talking about helicopters, it probably flew over me right now because there was a helicopter also almost at the same time. I don't think it was the same one.
But yeah, and I don't have like I have an 8-core, 16-thread, 40 gig NVMe. I have a pretty powerful laptop.
Yeah.
So yeah, video is a problem for me right now in terms of editing. So that's why I try to simplify.
Yeah, and of course, when you're doing real estate, usually people want it, yesterday, the clips.
Yeah.
So that's always. But there were a few questions about from Commodore Photography. He has asked this probably earlier, which I missed. Sorry about that. It was questions about Olympus vintage cameras recommendations. Do you know anything about the Olympus vintage cameras?
Yeah, I think the OM2 is really good. Good vintage camera to start with, 35 millimeter OM2, because it's still a fully mechanical camera, but it also has aperture priority, right? The OM1 is fully mechanical, but the OM2 has aperture priorities. So if you want a fully mechanical experience, and it still has a light meter, but you have to adjust the exposure to the light meter, so you're not totally in the dark. And the OM2, I think that one is aperture priority, and that's easy to work with, if you're coming from digital. So those two I think are really good, and they're not too expensive. You can usually find them for $100 or less with a lens, and usually you get a 50 millimeter f1.8 lens, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, the 50 millimeter lens was the kit lens back then.
Yeah, the 50 millimeter f1.8 is really good lens, and then you can expand from there, and they're well made. And if you want a little more advanced camera, the Olympus OM2S has a spot meter as well, spot metering in addition to aperture priority. So that's a really good camera too for vintage, and it's not too expensive either. I think the rule of thumb is, though, to avoid the OM4 because it was draining the battery or something. So people, you don't see too many people buying an OM4, or they recommend like the OM2S over the OM4.
Yeah.
But that's as much as I know about vintage Olympus cameras. I think if you're talking about film cameras.
Yeah, I assume that when you're talking about vintage.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you can say that a digital camera can be vintage. Maybe the really early first ones could be considered vintage already.
Yeah.
I would say that the most important thing, of course, is then if you have the possibility to check the camera before you buy anything, because they might have some inconsistent shutters. The best way to test it is to use it on longer shutter speeds, and let's turn it to 2 seconds and see if it's actually about 2 seconds.
Yeah,
because they might wear out. And then there was also a question about if the camera has a battery in, check that you can get those batteries, because they used to have mercury batteries, which are now illegal. You cannot use them anymore.
They do have a substitute now. I have it. Well, I have it over there, but yeah, there are substitutes now for those batteries.
Oh, they are. Okay, because I've heard that there are some different voltages or some slight differences that they might not.
Yeah.
The light meters might not work perfectly on those, but if you don't need the light meter, then it's not a problem.
Right, and the OM2S will use standard modern batteries, so you can avoid the OM2 and the OM1s. Yeah, you have to find and I bought mine on eBay. I have it right in a box over here. Hold on.
Let's see what he has there in his treasure case.
Oh, it's not here. All right, I lied.
Do you know what we should do, Rob? Sometime do a live stream that we take out all our cameras that we have, and then talk about those cameras.
Yeah,
that would be interesting to see if anybody would watch that.
I'll watch. I'd love to see all your cameras,
man. Sorry. Let's see. There was one question about noise reduction. Wait a minute. It was Rahul Dara that I'm getting rejected for noise issues on EM5 Mark II on Shutterstock and Adobe Stock. Any suggestions? Well, the first thing, of course, is that try to expose as bright images as possible, and then in the post you could lower the exposure. That will kind of like hide the noise a bit. If you need to lift up the shadows or lift up the exposure, that will reveal the noise. That's my first suggestion. And then, of course, somebody already commented on that use Topaz denoise AI, which works really well. Unless you overdo it, of course, do not overdo it, and try to do some correction in post also. But those are, and then of course the noise reduction on your camera could be on if you prefer. I personally don't have it on, but you can try that too and see if that makes any difference. Do you have any comments on that, Rob?
Yeah, I think you covered it. I mean, basically you have to expose at base ISO and get the most light that you can in. You know, add flash if that's an option. You know, if you're outdoors, you shouldn't be getting any noise. But if you're indoors, yeah, add a flash. Just get as much light as you can in, and yeah, don't, you know, expose to the right, all those different techniques.
But it's easier to get rid of the noise than otherwise. If that's the reason that the images are rejected, then don't worry, because most of the images are rejected because they are bad photographs. And if that's your reason, then you don't, let's say they're in the right direction anyway. So you just have to figure out how the noise reduction works.
Right.
Have you ever, let's see, where is the comment? I can't take the comment out now. Have you ever, Rob, submitted any images to stock?
No, I've never submitted anything.
Yeah, I used to do that way back when there were actually some money in it. Now you can get them for like 50 cents or $1. You can get, a bunch of images. But it used to, there wasn't actually a time when that wasn't really that bad. And I used to have a studio about, it was 2010 when I got rid of it. And there I used to do some studio shots that were in stock.
Yeah.
So now it doesn't really make any sense when you get, $1 image. You need to have so many images. But there are some photographers still who make a living out of that. But they shoot like, all the time.
Yeah.
And you have to know what to make, because you have to be,
Yeah, it's a business like any other business, right? It's very competitive, and you have to be good at what you do. There's no business that you can't be successful in, right? If you put in the work and treat it like a business.
Of course, yes.
Stock photography is just not something that I could do, but I don't want to discourage anybody from doing stock photography. If you're good at it, you can make money.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I'll never forget what someone told me, it's like, because I went to pre-law. I did some study in law. I was thinking about being an attorney at one time. And, you hear there's so many attorneys, at least here in the U.S., there's so many attorneys. And I was a little bit discouraged, right? And he said, yeah, there's a lot of attorneys, but there's not enough good ones. And I said, you're right. So I tried to, it didn't pan out for me, but whenever somebody feels a little discouraged about anything, I said, there's never enough good ones, whatever it is.
That's true.
You'll do well.
True. Let's see if there are any questions. There is a ClickFlash question. I am an EM10 Mark I user about to upgrade camera. I'm thinking about jumping ship to Fuji, but still not convinced. What would you say to convince me to stay with Olympus cameras? Thanks.
Oh,
you can start.
Yeah, this is easy for me because I bought a Fujifilm X-T30, and it's just been sitting on my shelf. And there's two really, really big reasons. One is that the ergonomics, right? whether it's the XT30 or the XT3, they're pretty similar in terms of ergonomics. I felt like the Olympus cameras, the ergonomics are so much better. You know, they have full-on dials, you know, here and here. And the aperture ring being on the lens, like a lot of the Fujis do, it's every time I picked up the camera, the aperture was different. I mean, every camera has its challenges, but for me, the ergonomics on the Olympuses were so superior. And I'm like a surgeon on the Olympus camera. When I get the Fujifilm, you know, it has a top dial for shutter speed, a top dial for, I forget, something else. I have it right there. But it's like, once you set your shutter speed and aperture, all those dials are useless, right? They have to stay where they are. So yeah, it has a lot of buttons and dials on it, but once things are set, you can't use them anymore. Whereas the Olympus, you know, everything can be reassigned very easily, and they're full on dials. The other two is going back to the size and weight. Yeah, the body itself is very similar in terms of size and weight to the EM5s or your EM10 Mark I. But once you start tacking on the lenses, the system gets large very quickly. And it's not so compact and lightweight after you start tacking on the accessories and things. And then finally is the image quality is not, you know, so much better. It's a little better in low light, no question, right? The larger the sensor, it's always going to outperform smaller sensors. But ultimately, you know, I don't shoot cameras at their extremes. You know, I'm not shooting in extremely low light or extremely high dynamic range scenes. Every camera is going to fail. So again, this is where I say, as you improve as a photographer and improve your skill set, the less the gear matters. And I'm at a point now that I can take just about any camera and get the results that I want, regardless of the gear, because I understand the limitations of the camera and I have the skill set to get around those limitations. So the Fujifilm, in terms of image quality, didn't offer anything more that I couldn't easily overcome with what I already have. But now I have the ergonomics and the smaller, you know, I can carry the smaller bag, smaller lenses and everything, and get just as good as image quality, if not better in many cases, than the Fujifilm. So Fujifilm makes a fine camera. It takes terrific images. But like I said, when I started using it, it was very frustrating. And the trade-off of trying to get better image quality out of it just wasn't worth it, you know, because I can always get excellent image quality out of the Olympus camera with just a little bit of, you know, little bit of work in the extreme cases, whether it's through bracketing or adding flash or, you know, whatever. So I think the Olympus cameras are very well made. The ergonomics are perfect, and the image quality is as good as any camera out there if you know what you're doing, you know. And that's the most important thing to me.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. And to click flash, have you checked out the EM10 Mark IV? That's the newest EM10 camera, and check out that and see, because it has a lot better ergonomics, because there's a small little thing. I have it somewhere. No, it's actually right here. It has a small little, I don't know what you call, bend here, so that it feels really good in my hand. And this camera nowadays is actually my go-to set with the 12 to 45 millimeter lens. I don't know why, but I just like this camera. There are a few things that I don't like, and one thing is that there is no way to store your settings, so that you cannot really have different settings on it. You just you know, set it up once and that's it. Of course, you can change those. But then if you want to go back to your basic settings, then you need to, you know, change everything by hand. You don't have any custom memory slots, and that's the only kind of like a downside on that camera, which I don't really understand why Olympus did that, because I think that's one of the core things, that you can set up different shooting scenarios to memory slots.
And that's what kept me on the EM1 Mark II or EM10 Mark II for so long, and skipping the EM10 Mark III. was the lack of the custom features. I think for most people it's okay if they don't have it, but it was definitely a workflow issue for me in my professional work. I use the custom settings 100% when I'm out shooting professionally.
Exactly. I hope that our answers will keep you in Olympus cameras.
Yeah, and like I said,
if you go with Fuji, no, don't worry about it. It's all about you anyways. If you can get really great images with Fuji too, so don't worry about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what made me buy it. Is I saw all the gorgeous images, from people that shot with Fuji on Flickr and Instagram, and I was like, wow, I was really excited about it. And then ultimately I was like, because someone asked me once, what camera do I regret buying of all the cameras I have? And I didn't have to think twice. I was like, the Fuji X-T30.
Oh, okay, I see. I see. Then there's a lens question from Kevin Chen. Is the 12 to 40 f2.8 worth getting over the 14 to 42 kit lens? And if I can start, I would say that it all depends on what you are using it for, because the 14 to 42 kit lens, if you have the electronic zoom version, is really small and you can fit it in your pocket, and it's really easy to carry around. And the Pro lens is, of course, is really good, but it's a lot bigger. But then if that's not the case, then I would go, and of course, if you have the money, don't buy anything that you cannot really afford. But if you have the money and everything else works fine and the size doesn't really matter, then I would definitely take the 12 to 40 millimeter f2.8 lens, because it's a Pro lens. It has a lot of good features. It's weather sealed and everything, and it's perfect image quality. So I would go with that.
Yeah, I would agree. If money no object, get the best you can get, right?
Of course, yeah.
The 12 to 40 Pro f2.8, but I did a comparison directly against the 14 to 42 kit lens and the 12 to 40 Pro lens in one of my videos that you'll find it on my channel. But basically, it is sharper, okay, at wide open. But going from f2.8 to f3.5 is not that big a deal. But the reasons you would buy the f2.8 is because it is a constant. For me personally, I bought it for video work, because I never know what part of the room I'll be able to stand in if I'm at an event, and I have to be able to zoom but maintain that low aperture f2.8.
Yeah.
So I can gather as much light. So I think that was the reason I bought it. I had a very specific professional use for it. Being able to zoom in and out and stay at f2.8. I think for the average enthusiast, the advantages are, of course, as Peter mentioned, the weather sealing and the additional sharpness. It is clearly sharper, when you pixel peep. And it also has a much closer focusing distance, so you can get very close to subjects and do close-up photography with it. So it has some advantages. Is it worth $700 or $800 more for the average person? You have to decide that for yourself. But I tell most people, just use the kit lens. You're fine. In most cases. And then if you have some very specific reason you need f2.8, like I did professionally, then and I think for a lot of the Pro lenses, that is the case. That's why they call it Pro, is Olympus has a very good lens lineup that is not Pro, that give you very sharp images, that have adequate apertures and things. And the only reason you would buy a Pro lens is usually you have a very specific reason. You need that aperture or that sharpness or the weather sealing. Well, you need it for a very specific reason. And usually it's because it's for paid work. So that's just my take on it. I get criticized for that because, everybody asks me, what's the answer? And I'm like, a kit lens. and they're like, what are you talking about? Because the kit lens is not always the answer. But if most people that come to my channel, I tell them the kit lens is fine, or the standard lenses that Olympus offers. You really don't need a Pro lens for most things.
Well, you don't need when you're starting out, because that's I think, of course, as we thought, if the money is no object, then of course buy the best you can. But still, I think the kit lens is better than many think, because usually people just think that kit lenses are no good. But I think especially the electronic zoom version is the newer one is quite good actually. it's not that fast, but it's quite good. And I like I don't like the electronic zoom that much, but I like the so that it goes like a pancake when you turn off the camera. And I think that's what I like about it. But for video, as you said, it's not constant the aperture, so it will be a bit darker when you start zooming in, and then that's no good for video. You cannot use it.
Absolutely. And in video, 1 or 2 stops difference going from f2.8 to f4 to f5.6, your ISO cranks up fast. It's a big deal.
It is.
Anyhow,
a lot of stops. So let's see, what else do we have? Did I miss something? Let's see.
Yeah, Kevin followed up with, he saw the 12 to 40 for $400 US. And my advice is don't buy something because it's on sale. Otherwise, you'll end up with 100 cameras like me and lenses and stuff that I never use.
Oh, yeah.
There'll always be a sale.
Okay, this is an interesting question from Emilio. I hope I said it right. I think it sounds like from Czechoslovakia, the name, but not Czechoslovakia, sorry, that's Czech or Slovakia. But anyways, once you overcome technical side of photography, what is most important things to make good photography? That's a really interesting question. And do you want to start, Rob, or do you have anything that comes to mind after technical?
Like I was saying, I've reached a point where I'm fairly comfortable technically to get any kind of exposure that I want. So now I can focus on what makes a good photograph. And I have to go back to it becomes a very personal journey at that point, and just enjoying the process. So always, study lighting, composition, copy the pros, right? The famous artists or photographers, try to find something you really enjoy and take pictures of it. Just enjoy the process. That to me makes a good photograph, because there's so many photographs that, I'll put on Instagram that I just love and get the least amount of likes. And I'm like, this is one of my favorite photos because I know what it took to take that photo. You weren't there to appreciate what it took for me to get that photo or what that photo means to me. And so a good photograph is very subjective to each individual, in my opinion.
And there's always about an image is that when you make an image or take whatever, you always have a personal feeling or personal kind of like knowledge that what it took to make the image, then you're really happy and you had a good time. Like family photos and photos of kids are usually like that you have a unsharp photography of your grandkid. That's a marvelous photo if it's the only one.
Yeah.
But others might think that, well, that's an unsharp photograph. What's the fuss about it? So that's always, you have to kind of like try to, I don't know what the word is, but try to distance yourself from the moment that you took the photograph. Of course, it can be good for you, but if others see that what you have put into it, it tells a story, then it's most likely a good photograph. And I think storytelling is something that is important. And then there was, I think it was Diana Arbus, a American photographer who died in 1972, said that a good photograph raises more questions than gives answers. I think that's a great quote, I think. And that's, it has to be, understood what it is. And you maybe want to see what kind of photograph Diana Arbus was making to understand what she meant. But I think that has a lot of wisdom in that sense. And also it's, which I now I don't remember who said that photography is not about depth of field, it's about depth of feeling. And I think that's another good quote. But unfortunately, I don't remember who said it. But I think that is something to consider. And of course, the basic things about composition, learn the way we see images and what is a good composition. Of course, first you start. Or the paradox of composition is that usually if you start making the perfect composition. The images are quite dull. When you start breaking the convention, then your images start to become interesting. But what you should break, and that is the hardest question, that somehow you have to, when somebody looks at the image, you have to kind of see from the image that this photographer knows what he or she is doing, and she knows everything, but have chosen to do it this way. It's really hard to explain what that feeling is, but that's something to aim. That may be a bit further away if you're just starting out, but that's kind of like the goal where you should go.
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
no, it makes sense. I think telling a story, and once you understand kind of the basics of composition and lighting and things, deviating from that to tell the story, everything you said, you just go out and you take a lot of pictures, and it'll start to come to your style. If you want it, you'll do it, basically.
Yeah. And it's practice, photographing and looking at photographs and learning every time. But that's what I love about photography, is that there's a lot to learn every day. I've been photographing since I was 16 and been a professional for 30 years. I still learn or want to learn something new every day. It's not always possible, but and still I make bad photographs. I'm wise enough not to show the worst ones. Maybe some bad ones I've shown, but I try to hide the worst photograph. That's also one thing that learn to kind of like kill your darlings. Don't show, if you go out and let's say a trip and you want to make some photography during that trip, don't show all the 300 images or 3,000 that you took. Narrow them down to 10 really good images. Nobody cares then about the 200 or 2,900 images.
Yeah.
Nobody asks how many did you need to take to get this one. Nobody kind of like cares about that.
Right. And good. It's all very subjective. What is a good photograph? Once you kind of got the technical things down.
That was a long answer.
Yeah, but it's
there is an interesting question from Graham Making. Do you know what the I can't pronounce the thing, but he was talking about that battery drains out when it's turned off. I can't really say because my cameras are not turned off that often with a battery in, so I really cannot say. And have you ever?
No, I mean the battery itself is going to have its own natural drain over time.
Yeah, maybe that it is.
In addition to any draw on the camera says, I have no idea. It's I always carry 2-3 batteries and just keep them charged regularly. I don't pay attention much to the finer points like that.
But that's interesting. That's something that maybe I'll test and leave some camera untouched and see what happens. Could be that. Have you checked from your camera menu that the state of the battery? Because there is. Do you remember where it is? I always forget. It's somewhere. You have a camera right there.
Well, on the I'm using the M10.
Did I see Lumix on that lens?
Yes, this is my this is my EM1 Mark III with the. This is what I use for my video work in real estate. This lens.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the 8-25 to come out.
Oh yes, I hope that comes out.
When that comes out, then this Lumix will be gone.
Okay, Graham says that the battery is 12 months old, so it's probably not the battery. Maybe it is. Okay, let's see. I'll set you as a full screen.
Yeah, there's a battery.
Now you're full screen there.
Let's see.
I'll take that off.
It's probably in the H menu.
It was right there.
J2.
That's where you can check out the battery status is the one. And there you see the degradation is you get all the 5 squares lit.
Right.
That means that the battery is healthy. just in case, check out that and see if that is.
Yeah, it'll be in the J menu on either camera, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think of J as just J. I call junk because I never use anything in those menus.
Junk menu. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Hope that helps. But I need to test that and see if that happens with the new batteries. And then there is a question about, is Panasonic Lumix 25mm f1.7 ASPH lens any good? You have that, don't you?
I got 2 of them.
Oh, that's true. I remember you were talking about that earlier in some of your videos.
No, I actually tested this lens in another video, but I'll summarize it for you. For photography, no problem at all. It's excellent. There was only one issue that people have brought up about this lens, is that when you're at f4, specifically at f4, it back focuses a little bit. I don't experience that issue, so it may be kind of random. But other than that, yeah, it's very sharp. It's very fast. It's about half the price of the Olympus version. Where you compromise on this lens is really with the video side. The autofocus is terrible. You know, it's very, very slow to autofocus with face detect when you're working with video. But for photography, I think this makes a great first prime lens. If you're on a budget, if you can afford, you know, like this, you can buy this for $100, $150 all day long. The Olympus between $200 and $250 all day long. You know, if you shop it, I still recommend the Olympus over the Panasonic. It's always going to work better and focus better on an Olympus body. But you know, if you're on a very tight budget, I think it's a great option, and you're not doing video. It takes very sharp images.
Yeah, and then the next question, we go back to selecting your images. Then Victor Skorban is saying, a bit in contradiction of Peter, not always need to select from 300 pictures to 10 images. If all 300 images are unique and linked to storytelling, then you can share all, like did Moriyama, Daido Moriyama. Yeah, that's true. And he's an interesting photographer. And I think I've talked about him before in one of my live streams. And he was a Japanese photographer who is, there was actually a YouTube video about him when he shoots. And he's one of those that's rushing around and shooting everything that moves in a way. And wow, he's a master of that. He has this small, you know, what do you call the compact camera? I think he still uses film. Black and white film has some kind of, maybe a Contax D2 or something like that, or a small Ricoh. Really? I'm not really sure what he shoots now. But those images are really, really interesting. And I agree on that one. I agree, Victor. Then if you are like Daido Moriyama, then 1,000 images are fine, because the whole thing is about rushing and shooting everything that moves and shooting a lot, really fast-paced photography. And I think he's really interesting. Like many Japanese photographers, it's a bit of a different culture, especially from Europe, and they have a totally different way of seeing it, which I find really interesting, because it's something that I don't see that much over here.
That would be a great challenge for all of us.
Sorry?
I think that would be a great challenge for all of us, right? Me, you, Robin. Go out and take 300 images in 1 hour, or whatever the time frame is, and show them all.
That would be, and show them all. That would be totally, if somebody likes to watch that many images in a row, we could make a live stream and watch all 900 images.
Oh my God. Anyway, we'll have to give that some thought. That sounds interesting.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting.
Because I used to always think like a picture a day was hard, right? Take one picture every day.
Yeah, I've started once about 12, 15 years ago, and I remember going till March 15th or something like that, and then I failed miserably, and then I went back to the images, and they weren't really that good. But if you really concentrate on that and have the time, then that is a great project to do. Right.
But doing 300 in one day?
Yeah. Okay, then there is one question from Thomas Chauskas. On EM10 Mark II, is there a screen indicator as to what MySets you are in? Do you remember that? I have to say that.
Yes. I'll flip back over here. Let me see.
You have your camera. Let's make you
let's see.
Full screen again so that we can show.
Right now, I'm just an aperture priority. Let me click the info button. All right, so I'm going to flip over. You see the big letter A down there at the bottom? Now I'm in custom mode 3, so it says C3 just above the A, which is the aperture priority mode. Now I'm in C2, C1. But if I go into regular aperture priority, you can see that that little C above it goes away.
Yeah, what about the EM10 Mark II? That was...
oh, an EM10 Mark II. Oh,
yeah, I think that was...
yeah, it should be the same. Let me just hook it up real quick.
Yeah, let's see. You all set. This is really great that you have all set. I'll turn off the question so we can see better. So there's no...
Yeah, I just got this working right.
Yeah, this is great when you can see that.
Let me turn this on. Let me see. There we go. So if I go into aperture priority, let me program a MySet real quick. I don't think I have anything set up. So set, right? So I have MySet 1 set up. And then let me set it to a dial.
There's one great feature on EM10 Mark II that you can actually use the mode dial for your MySets.
Right, right. So I'll just set it to a function button.
Okay, or a button too.
So right now I'm in aperture priority. If I hit FN1, see it says my 1.
Yeah, it's the same way.
Right, I can turn it off.
Yeah.
All right.
It works the same way.
Yeah, it works. Oops, it works the same way.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Yep, that's what I do.
Let's see. Then there was Then a fruit is asking, for how long can we use EM5 Mark II as a webcam with AC power supply safely? Will the camera heat up like when filming? Not to my knowledge. I think you can use it for a long time. I mean, I haven't heard any overheating.
Yeah, I used it once for about an hour with no problem. But yeah, if you want to do 3 hours, you know, I use the EM1 Mark II for 3 hours, 4 hours all the time. I can't imagine the EM5 Mark II would be any different.
Yeah, and that's a good way because it is a camera that can be used as a webcam. You can put the software, which is now for PCs and for Mac, and then you just use the USB cable that came with the camera and attach it to your USB port, and then it can be shown as a camera on different like Zoom and Teams and I think it's Skype too.
Yeah, one of my live streams, I don't know which episode it was, but I did use the webcam software for Olympus without any problem.
Yeah, it works really well. The only thing to remember that the sound doesn't go through the USB, so you need a separate microphones. Usually, if you use it with your computer, then you can use the computer audio if it's like a Zoom meeting or something. Yeah. Something like that. But then, of course, if the room is very echoey, then or there is an echo in the room, then you might want to have some soundboards like Rob had there. We can.
Yeah, and you know, really to get the best sound, it's really about proximity of the microphone to your mouth.
Yeah.
You know, you can see I got soundproofing and everything, but if I take the microphone away just at arm's length, you can probably hear a big difference just like this.
It is a difference.
So, so proximity is the #1 thing to sound quality.
Yep, that's true. Then we have Tori Anderson. He's actually from watching this on Facebook, on my Facebook group. Hi newbie here. Favorite focal length for landscapes? Any vintage lenses you would recommend? Well, of course, the first thing is that usually when you're doing landscape, you are using wide-angle lenses. That's usually the case. But of course, you could use longer lenses to get a bit of a different look into your images. And I would start, if I'm interested in landscape, I would start with the lenses that I have, and then start thinking after I've done, a few times or half a year, maybe what I do like and what are the focal lengths that I'm using a lot, or is there something that I would like to have done, or maybe I would have liked them to be wider or something like that, and then start to decide. So there are a lot of good options from M.Zuiko, and I would recommend a zoom lens in the start too, because then you have more ways to make the composition. It's a bit easier to start. So if you have the kit zoom lens, then start with that.
Yeah, kit lens is always the answer.
Yeah, that's a good start. But I would probably go, next one would be maybe we already talked about the 12 to 40, or then maybe the 7 to 14 millimeter lens also for landscapes. That's also a good one. And then of course you have the 12 millimeter and 17 millimeters, the pro and the non-pro versions, which are really good. It all depends on, of course, too, that if you are making the landscapes more handheld and hiking style, or you go with your tripod and wait for hours for the light to become, then maybe a bigger lens is not a problem. It's also about the style. But I've seen a few videos about landscape photography with long lenses, and that's really interesting because the perspective is a bit different. You kind of squeeze the perspective, and things that are really far away seems to be closer, and it looks more condensed, the whole scenery, and it can give you a bit of a different look. So don't forget that too. So if you have several lenses, try all of them and see what is your style and what you like.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is the kit lens is fine, 14 to 42. You can shoot at 14, you can shoot at 42, so you have that flexibility. For landscapes though, what's really nice about different focal lengths, if you want to shoot wide, you have that, but when you shoot tighter, you also have the option to do panoramas where you take multiple shots and stitch them back together. So depending on what kind of landscape you want to do you want to do just a single shot wide? Do you want to do a panorama where you're taking tighter shots but stitching them together? That's going to dictate the focal length that you want if you're considering any vintage lenses. There's so many good vintage lenses out there that it's hard to recommend one specifically for landscape. So it depends. If you want to get a single shot, then yeah, wider angle is better. And if you're doing stitching, I like to use 25 to 50 in that range. So yeah, it's a little bit too broad of a question in terms of what vintage lens to get, because there's a lot of good vintage lenses.
And then there was a couple of questions. About the Romeyer is saying that I cannot update the new firmware for 100 to 400 millimeter on my EM1 Mark II. On the EM1 Mark III, it worked. Apparently, I'm not the only one. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the 100 and 400 millimeter, so I can't really say that. But that sounds odd and a pity if that's the case. And I think there are some other ones that have commented on that too. Maybe that's need to be contacted Olympus. Maybe I will write that down. And
yeah, I haven't heard that, because if you're not able to update the firmware on EM1 Mark II, because it can't be just specific for that lens. I know that's all the last firmware update was for, but I would, that's all I can say is try a different computer, because I have 3 laptops. On one of my laptops, it doesn't update the firmware on my camera.
Oh, really?
It doesn't work. So fortunately, I had another one, and my new one worked perfectly fine, but I could never get, and it scared me to death because the camera froze during the firmware update.
Ooh, no good. That's
but
bad.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I unplugged everything and the camera powered up fine. So I tried it on a different computer and it was perfectly fine.
All right. Then there is Deals for Life asking, which Olympus Pro Prime lens is sharper, the 17mm or 25? Are they worth the asked price? Well, first, I would choose the lens from what I need. Do I need a 75mm or 25? They're both sharp. But I think the 17mm is the best lens when it comes to the image quality of the 3 prime lenses. The holy grail or the whatever, not the holy grail, the what's the word?
Trinity.
Just holy trinity, yeah.
Yeah.
Lenses, and the 17mm has a little bit a different character to it. So if you don't mind it being a bit wider than 25, then I would go with the 17. But of course, if you need 25mm, then that's a better. The difference isn't that big, and so it wouldn't. The difference in focal length makes a big of a difference than the sharpness.
And I've heard Robin and Jimmy also said the same thing. They thought the 17 was the best of the 3 when they were asked that.
Yeah. And let's see, what else do we have? I need to get a little closer. And then there was a question about, have you any news on the release date for the 100mm macro? And I have to say, I don't. I know no idea when it's coming. I hope it comes soon, because it's something in macro that sometimes the 60mm could be a bit too short. The subject is too close. You cannot really put any light between the lens and the subject, but that's why I think the 100mm is a really interesting lens. And you've done some macro too, haven't you?
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, I use mostly the extension tubes, but I do have the Nikon equivalents for 160. I have the 60mm. They call it micro lenses, and the 100mm micro f2.8 Nikons. And yeah, the working distance. The more working distance you have, the better. So you can add light in, because with macro photography, you need lots of light generally, because you have to work at very high aperture numbers. So you need a lot of light, and the less the lens gets in the way, the better.
Oh yeah. And then there's one interesting question from Joey Carey. I see a lot of imagery for sale which has been heavily photoshopped or manipulated. Do you think the manipulation is an addition to the art of photography, or is it going too far? Before I ask this to Rob, I would say that it is an addition. And I think it's a matter of taste, which is too far. I'm not personally making very heavy manipulation to images or making composite images, combining several images, but I think it adds up to photography. And you've been doing a lot of online or live image editing on your channel. How do you see this? You've been using workspace, the Olympus workspace, where you cannot kind of like make composite images. But how do you see this?
I think it's an addition. You know, it's really different strokes for different folks, right? Whatever you like, whatever you find pleasure and enjoyment in, you should do it. And when you say imagery for sale, yeah, if you don't like it, don't buy it. But I think I don't think it takes away anything from photography itself, right? The person taking the picture, if they want to go in post-processing and add to that, to their vision or whatever they had in their mind, you know, it's their creation, their work, right? So I don't think it takes anything away from a photo by adding, you know, processing to it, whether it's an art filter or saturation or taking, you know, like black and white images, right? That's like a huge difference. You know, I take a color image and I take all the color away, right? But yeah, I don't think it takes anything away. Honestly, it's an addition. It can never go too far. I think people are just.
I think it's a matter of taste. Some of us like it, some of us don't. And
yeah,
I know there are.
The only time it's a problem is if somebody's dishonest about it. They say they got this image straight out of camera.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah,
that's the only time I would have an issue.
Yeah, there was actually here in Finland in one of the photographic groups, there was a big feud about that because somebody had a photograph of a moon behind one church, and it's impossible. And he said that, yeah, I took it, but if you look at the data, the moon isn't there. It's impossible. So then that was a good point. That always, admit that it's manipulated.
Right.
If it is, then nothing wrong with that. If it is.
Yep.
Let's see. All right. Yeah, they were talking about batteries, that there are some other cameras too. So it's not camera dependent, the battery thing. It's about batteries itself, that the way they're made, that they drain over time if you don't use them.
Yeah, and I've heard that. The one thing though that I noticed was I have one battery, like the one we just looked at on the screen, was from 2016, right, manufacture date, and then I have newer batteries from 2019, and my general feeling is over time, like when I'm doing my live streaming, and as many of you know, they go for 3 hours. I noticed that even the 2016 battery, even though it's like 4 years old now, and I use it regularly, it only lasts about 15 minutes less than my newer 2019 battery overall during a live stream. Really, so they hold up pretty well over time. But if your camera's draining the battery quickly, like I think Sephram was saying, his G9 drained his batteries off and they replaced the camera.
If that's the case, I need to test that and see how it goes and what happens. It could be.
This one was at 96%. I charged up the battery on Monday, and I haven't touched the camera until just today, maybe a little bit yesterday, but it's down 4% just in 2 days with virtually no use.
Okay, so
just to give you some perspective. Yeah.
So it happens, yeah.
Yeah, I know it was fully charged when I put it in my car, and I had to take it out for something yesterday, just for like 1 minute, and then 1 minute today. But yeah, it's drained 4% in 2 days, just as a frame of reference if you're trying to compare.
Oh yeah, and there's one question I forgot to ask in the beginning, that you have some new forum. What's that all about?
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't call it new anymore. It's been up most of the year, but
okay.
It's just a place. I set it up originally as a place for me to be able to keep track of the questions that I get, because people ask in the comments section, or they'll send me an email or something, and I can't remember, where it was or ever find it again. But if I keep it in the forum, so a lot of times I'll cut and paste comments out of the videos and put them in the forum, or I'll cut and paste an email and put it into my forum so I can remember. And while I was setting it up, I said, well, I might as well add some categories here, so if people have questions they can ask, or if they want to share their images. So the forum is really a place for other photographers to kind of come together and share their photography and their or ask questions and things. Mostly my viewers, but everyone is welcome to join.
That's interesting. So there is going to be a huge database of answers then, because that's actually something that I've sometimes thought, that there are a lot of questions in YouTube comments, but they just answer them, and then there might be some follow-ups, and that's it. Nobody can find them in, let's say, in a month.
Yeah. So I always tell people, don't
really clever way, because there are a lot of questions that people ask the same questions, and then you might have a database on that. That's really great.
Yeah, and it's just like I said, it's mostly for because everyone, these questions, like you said, have been asked millions of times, right, over and over again. But sometimes people they like to hear it from a particular person. Like a lot of people like to hear what my answer is, right?
Of course,
I would answer the same question. and you might answer it differently. Like the question about what do you do after you know the technicals? How do you take a good photo, right? Because a lot of times very, very technical questions, I'll refer people to the MU43 forum. It's an excellent forum and there's a lot of great users there as well. But sometimes people just want to ask me. They don't want to ask like an open forum. So, anyway, that's why I set it up, just to kind of share photography questions.
And you can find the link in your channel, maybe. Was it robtrek.com, was it?
Yeah, robtrek.com, and then you'll see a link on the top for the forum. All
right, cool. So people go there and see the great answers.
Yeah, great answers in photography, and yeah.
That's really good, and I really like that because that will be a database, because usually you can store those questions and they don't go away in some YouTube comments in old videos.
Right,
where nobody.
And a lot of times the answer will be a link to a YouTube video. Might be one of yours,
Yeah, that's always appreciated. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, it's an easy way to answer questions, because things get lost in the YouTube comments so many times.
Yeah, and sometimes those questions are really general that a lot of people ask, and I don't think many who watch the YouTube videos go and read the comments that much.
Yeah,
they might comment something, but I don't think they scroll through. Maybe I'm wrong, because I don't usually. So I don't think that many others do, but maybe they do. I don't know if there are any who disagree on the audience right now. We still have 125 people watching, which is a good amount. This is always very good when people are watching. And I never asked you how much time you, Rob, have.
I have no schedule.
You have no schedule today. Yeah, this is the
I have a photo job I have to go to later, but
Yeah, but that's isn't it early morning? So we started at 8 a.m. at your time, was it?
Yeah, it's very, very early today. So and my photo jobs are very flexible. I could probably even go tomorrow if I wanted to, because it's an empty property. It's going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah, because I think was it some of your live streams that I was watching that you said that you had your alarm at 5 a.m. because you wanted to do an early morning photo walk, and woke up hours later and missed the photo walk?
Yeah.
That happens.
I'm trying so hard, because there's a local photography club that David Crooks runs. He was in the chat section earlier.
Oh, okay.
But he's local to me, and I joined that recently, because if I don't put it on a schedule, I don't go out,
Oh.
So I thought this would be a great way to go out and meet other photographers and go out every week and take pictures, instead of just randomly going out. I have a fixed thing and a challenge, because a lot of times there'll be a challenge as well when we go on the photo walk. Like one week was mushrooms was the challenge. So I took pictures of mushrooms. Then the next week was, another garden that we went to. But yeah, I got to get my sleep scheduled so I can get up. I got up at 4:30 in the morning today.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what to do. I'm just because what's going to happen is I'm going to fall asleep around 6 or 7 o'clock tonight, then wake up at midnight, and then it's like having perpetual jet lag trying to adjust my sleep schedule. I don't know why I'm struggling so hard with it.
But actually, who cares when one sleeps and does photography? I don't think we don't have to be as the way at least the way I work. I don't have to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter when I'm sitting here at my desk or whatever.
Right, and it's definitely a very good life for me here in terms of being able to do photography for a living, right? And work on this channel, work on my YouTube channel as well. It's one of the best moves I've ever made, really switching full time to this. And fortunately, I'm in a position where I can do that, because I saved up for a long time money so that I have some cushion to transition to this kind of lifestyle. But it's really nice to be able to get up whenever you want and go to the job. And real estate photography in general, if you want to get into professional photography, if you can get your lines straight, you'll make money. And it's very easy photography. It's not hard. You know, it should be very easy for most of you to take a picture of a room or a house.
Yeah.
Just have to master the flash side and the workflow a little bit.
Yeah, it's more about that. And then you said earlier, of course, it's about, you know, mixing different kinds of light and different levels of light. You might have some really dark corners, and then you have a bright window, and then you might have some fluorescent lights and whatnot there, and that could be a mess.
I've done a few videos showing people how I do that. You know, it's basically it's bracketing. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
do you ever bracket the white balance?
No, I don't bracket white balance. What I do for white balance is I use a flash to illuminate the entire room with one light.
Yeah,
and then,
so you clean it up with flash.
Yeah, so flash establishes the color or the white balance of the room.
Yeah.
And then I'll take another picture with just the ambient light, and I don't care if the white balance is all mixed up. The second picture, I use the ambient light will actually be the exposure of the final image. And then, so I set that layer as a luminance layer. And then I add another layer with the flash, and that will be the color.
Oh.
And that'll add the color in. So now I have luminance, ambient light will be the luminance, and then the flash will be the color layer. And when I stack those on top of each other, it comes out nice. And then I just have to brush out a little masking things here and there, because the flash will create harsh shadows, right?
Yes.
So I have to do a little bit of masking to make the light look a little bit more natural, but for the most part, that's all there is to it.
That's an interesting workflow, but you know, you said it's easy. It's not that easy, actually. It takes some practice to be.
It takes.
Of course, if you're doing it for money, then you also have to be efficient. You can't spend too much time with it. It will be kind of like not very profitable if you have to work a really long time with the editing. When the workflow flows, then it's a good thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tools and techniques to speed up that workflow in Lightroom, and that's why I cannot switch from Lightroom Photoshop. There's so many softwares out there, excellent, like Luminar and Affinity and all of those things, but none of them have the exact tools that I need to do the kind of image blending and layering that I need to do.
Yeah. Now there is actually David Crook says that we're going out again on early Sunday morning, starting at 6:03 a.m. Now you need to set your alarm.
All right, awesome. I will do my best to be there, and I'll push the live stream out to 11 o'clock or something like I did last time.
What you should do actually, why don't you do the live stream while you're shooting there? Fix. I don't know if that's possible, but
I can do it, but I don't have a great data plan on my phone.
Okay, then it's not then it might be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. And signal issues can be a problem too. But I might record it. I'll record a little bit while I'm there, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. And now there is Lysipussy says, Rob, Rembrandt found it easy to paint as well.
Yes.
Referring to the easiness of what do you call the real estate photography.
Real estate, yeah. Just get your lines straight. You're halfway there, right?
That's true.
And if you just do HDR bracketing, you have to charge a little bit less, but you can get away with just HDR and get your lines straight. But that's how I started. I started with HDR. I didn't even use flash. I just did a 5-shot bracket, and but then that didn't overcome my white balance issues, right?
Yeah, that is the problem then.
Yeah,
but then there is Thomas.
Flash, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, and Thomas is saying that, Rob, why not do a tutorial on the flash images, luminance, and ambient as color? Both the site visit and the processing. I think you have. I think it was you have one video about that process on your channel, don't you?
Yeah, I think I do have one. I could do another one. You know, it doesn't hurt to see it because my workflow has changed a little bit since I've done that video.
Yeah, because I remember watching that, but that was probably interesting and because
yeah,
a lot of
watch that one now. That's probably about 80% of what I do now. I have changed my workflow a little bit since I made that video in terms of the images I take, and the processing is very similar, but the way I take the image is a little bit different since then. So if I get a chance, I'll try and do the photo job I go to today. Maybe I'll vlog it and put that up as a video and show you from start to finish.
That'd be really interesting too.
The images I take.
Interesting material to see how that works. But I think there are still over 100 people here, but there aren't too many questions, and we've been here for 2 hours, and Rob's been up for 6 hours already. Early morning, and he has some work to do. And I want to thank everyone who was here, commenting or not, YouTube or Facebook. Just so nice to have you all here, and thanks so much, Rob, for being here. It was a pleasure again, and always enjoy your answers because you know so much.
I try, Peter. I don't know everything, obviously, but I'm very flattered you asked me to
you know much or a lot.
Yeah, and I'm so glad. I got a chance to meet maybe some of your viewers who I haven't met before. So
yeah,
you join me on my streams. I do one, 3 times a week, but it's always a pleasure to be on your channel, Peter. And I highly recommend watching his videos first over mine.
No, I'm not. It depends on the subject. Maybe it depends on the subject. If you want to see how Rob edits images and learn from that, then I think you should check out his channel. And if you haven't checked out or subscribed to his channel, just now it's a good time to go over and see what he has on his channel. And I'll thank you again, Rob, and say hi, everybody, and thanks for watching, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.